I have to admit, it does feel good to be an OCE Siege fan some days.
A big pick onto Ram, onto Jigsaw, another spotted through the hatch. Cairo might get the trade, but Turd on 1 HP, 7 seconds. That's all he needs. Just one gunfight, one chance. He's got to win it, the one that matters most. And he falters at the finish line. 3 years it's taken, and Enterprise have their day. They are your first APL team, your only APL team to make main stage in SLC.
Off the back of a fantastic run for Enterprise Esports during the Salt Lake City Major last month, Oceania looks primed to build on that momentum and make a charge for that sweet, sweet major glory. However, does one successful major campaign a region make? Let's find out. For this preview series, we're going to cover all 8 teams in terms of results during kickoff and the major, if applicable, any roster moves they might have made during the offseason, and expectations going into Stage 1 in order of kickoff results in ascending order. So we go from last to first. And already, OCE was in a bit of a unique situation coming into the Challenger Series and the 2026 season. Following Gaming Gladiators' sudden decision to leave the league midway through 2025 and the disbandment of Orgla's team Ludovica, we only had 4 teams with a direct invite for 2026. That meant we were going to have the most slots available for teams to earn their place in Tier 1 Siege, which also means more potential exposure for new players to cut their teeth among some of the best in the region. However, Kickoff didn't exactly give those teams a chance to show the rest of the world what they can do. Stage 1 is going to be the real opportunity to do just that. And with the confirmation that both grand finalists will be attending EWC for Oceania, it means double the chances for OCE to be exposed to playing against some of the best teams in the world, which in turn means more development for not only those teams, but as a region as a whole. So, operators, welcome to Stage 1 of the 2026 Blast R6 Asia Pacific League's Oceanic Subdivision. Again, I need to find a way to abbreviate that. And we begin with 6 targets, the first of our 4 teams to come up from Challenger Series and a staple of Tier 2 Siege within OCE. Zethi, Orion, Kinvix, former Bliss coach Nico, and Snow have been grinding away in Tier 2 since mid-2025, playing in tournaments like Rivals and the Gauntlet while trying to make their case for joining Tier 1. The roster got finalized midway through Challenger Series with Snow departing the team and the player formerly known as Quixie coming in to take his place. He's been on a few different Tier 1 teams over the last few years, including Odium, Supernova, and Outlast. So on paper, this looked a solid upgrade, especially for 6 targets debut at the top level. The kickoff would show otherwise, as they would be among the first eliminated from the bracket, losing to both Shaiikademy and Rock LFO in the upper and lower brackets respectively. Though keep in mind they were playing with their sub-density instead of Quixie throughout kickoff. Despite that, however, they showed to be rather difficult to win against, always taking a map off their opponents and even coming back from a 7-0 loss on map 1 to win the second round of their match against Rock. And their individual numbers, if I'm being honest, weren't all that bad. Orion and Kinvix were putting on respectively consistent numbers. Zethi and Nico proved to be a solid backline. Even Density was MVP for 6 targets and the loss against Rock LFO. If the rumors I'm hearing are true, then we are going to be seeing some changes made to 6 targets going into the new stage. I will update you as I hear anything more on that. Either way, whatever the lineup for Stage 1, the boys should be able to bounce back after a rough kickoff run, especially if Quixie returned to the team as well. Our first confirmed roster for Stage 1 belongs to the Barbie Boys, who were among the biggest victims of the truncated kickoff format for APL. With Wettables and Killermat on the books, the Barbie Boys came up against what might be the worst opponents you could have ever dreamed up for a double elimination bracket. Enterprise in the upper bracket and the Chiefs in the lower bracket, the latter coming off an upset loss against Team Anios. Barbie Boys were utterly decimated by the new EP roster 2-0, and while it was a much closer affair against their new roster, the Chiefs still came away with a 2-1 win. While that might be the cruelest introduction you could have asked for, the Barbie Boys are looking to rebound with an improved roster following both Wet and Killerman being signed on elsewhere, with old head Pinku and new recruit Zickets bringing what I feel is a solid mix of youthful exuberance and tempered experience to a fledgling roster that has some potential, if given the opportunity to thrive. Playoffs might be a bit of a stretch for them at the moment, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if they pulled off what Rock LFO did during kickoff and shoot far higher than expected. Meanwhile, the roster formerly known as Team Anios have been given an upgrade, and a new home in Rival Esports, as they return to Siege, this time marking their territory within Oceania. During kickoff, Proxapan, Eraser, Chef, Wizard, and Shaz all had a solid start to their kickoff campaign, causing the first of many upsets by beating the new Chiefs roster 2-1 in the first round of the upper bracket. However, they would come up against the brick wall that is Enterprise Esports, and despite taking each other's map pick, the OCE super team ran away with it on the final map. In the lower bracket, Anios would be on the receiving end of their own upset defeat, this time at the hands of Rock LFO 0-2. It's around this time where the boys and girls of Rival Esports acquired the Anios roster and brought in Wettables for Barbie Boys and ACOG from Rock LFO in place of Wizard and Shaz. Killerman was originally slated to join Rival instead of ACOG, but had to step away for personal reasons again. The poor bloke can't seem to catch a break. This might be one of the more enticing rosters coming into Stage 1. Wettables and Chef teaming together for the very first time should be very fun to watch. Proxman is easily one of the sharpest entry fraggers around with Eraser as his backup, and ACOG has been putting up some pretty consistent numbers for TSG and Rock LFO, so he's more than earned his chance here. But when you're in the same league as Enterprise, Man LFO, Chiefs, and Rock LFO, it gets very close to the top. Rival should be comfortably fighting for a spot in the playoffs towards the end of the stage. They have the firepower on paper, but I have been proven wrong before. And our last team to come up from Challenger Series is Shaiikademy, the remnant of the disastrous Saga Esports Dream Warriors roster from 2025. Arcanum, Kaken, Shunt, Reelers, and Rani actually had a pretty good Challenger Series campaign, only losing one game to Team Anios during the Swiss phase, and not dropping a series throughout the bracket. So they looked primed to make a statement during OCE kickoff and wanted to wash away the failure of 2025. And they largely succeeded too. Their first match against 6 targets went the distance, and Shaiikademy came out on top 2-1, which was a massive boost for these lads. Sadly, Man LFO would shoot them down the very next match 2-0, and it wasn't particularly close either. But in the lower bracket against the Chiefs, Shaiikademy took it to the wire on both maps they played. It honestly could have gone either way for them, but the Chiefs were just that little bit better when it mattered, closing out both maps 8-7, and ending Shaiikademy's kickoff campaign. If you worry this is going to be a rerun of Saga Esports from Stage 1 last year where they couldn't win at a shooting gallery, don't be. This Shaiikademy roster looks far more put together and way more competent than that 3-week horror show. I'm confident Shaiikademy can get a couple of wins during the group stage, or at the very least, make it interesting. Playoffs, again, might be a step too far for them at the moment, but that's only because of how competitive it is at the top. On to the first of our teams carrying over from last year. The former True Synergy Gaming roster has returned to their Rock moniker after TSG was shut down late last year, which was a shame because I kind of like that they stayed on in OCE for as long as they did. Rock LFO largely retained the same roster and support staff from TSG, with former 6 targets player Snow coming in for Ned just after the Challenge Series wrapped. As a recap, Loyalty, Machine, Zero, ACOG, Alive, and Foresight all stuck together after TSG was disbanded, and their spot was retained for Oceania, so they didn't have to go through the Challenger Series. Going into kickoffs, many pundits, myself included, had Rock near the bottom of the standings. Even the official R6 Asia Twitter account put out a power rankings board that had them at 7th. And oh boy, were we proven wrong, even with a rough start to their run. During their loss against Man LFO in the first round of the upper bracket, Rock showed enough resilience to come back after a map 1 thrashing to make it a 5-7 map loss on map 2, which by the way was Man LFO's pick of Chalet. But the lower bracket is where they really started to flex and make us pundits regret underestimating them. A 2-1 win against Snow's former teammates of 6 targets, as well as a 2-0 victory over Team Anios, was more than enough of a statement for Rock LFO's credentials going into the 2026 season. Even their elimination against the Chiefs was hard fought and went down to the wire in 2 maps out of 3. I think it's fair to say that Rock LFO have certainly made their case for a top spot within Oceania. They've shown they have the talent and the resilience to challenge the best teams in the region. Their collective stats across kickoff were actually pretty good. Certainly nothing to scoff at, despite ultimately finishing 4th. But the thing I liked is that they were not relying on one single person to do it. Everyone was chipping in where it counts. I say it was because ACOG got signed to Rival Esports for Stage 1, and we don't yet know how Rock is going to fill the gap, either by promoting one of their subs or pulling from their Tier 2 talent pool. Either way, it would be wise not to underestimate them this stage, and we've already learned the hard way why. Meanwhile, Man LFO returned with a mission. Retain the top 3 spot within Oceania and maybe challenge for a spot at EWC, remaining almost the same since the 2025 season, with elements for Beers being the only change, as well as Velocity and Benji joining Sally behind the boys. Man LFO were looking the strongest they had since they formed in Stage 2 last year, in both firepower and strategy. And that was proven the case when they had a very strong run all the way up to the upper bracket final, beating both Rock LFO and Shaiikademy in clean 2-0 victories. But they couldn't match up against the double act of Enterprise and Chiefs back-to-back, which was understandably difficult given it was the pointy end of the bracket. These guys might be the most complete August roster we have in OCE, which is saying something given how many teams we have that don't have any kind of representation. They have a solid roster that is dummy consistent, a great support staff led by one of the most respected coaches within OCE. Now they just need the results to back it up, and an org to call home. And you want to know something? If they play their cards right, they might actually be in with a shout for that second slot at EWC. Now that would be a statement for anyone watching OCE with an interest in joining the league. But arguably the team standing in their way is the Chiefs, and they are not going to be an easy team to beat. Following their failed attempt to qualify for the 6th Invitational via the APL Regional Finals, the Chiefs released everyone on their roster as well as the support staff. Why they did that, I don't quite know. But they're back for 2026 with a brand new roster consisting of former Enterprise players, Relays and, well, player, Jake Hanna and Neptune from Circular Spheres, and Lunchbox from that old Ludovico roster. Sadly, it didn't get off to the greatest of starts, with a 2-1 loss to Team Anios in the first round of the bracket. Faced with the prospect of being first rounded at the hands of Barbie Boys, another team slated to do well in kickoff by the way, the new Chiefs boys grit their teeth and proved there was still life in them, beating BB 2-1. And this is where we begin to see why this roster was put together and why people were cautiously optimistic about how the rebuild was going to take shape. The wins over Shaiikademy and Rock LFO were a lot closer than I think the boys were expecting, and they nearly fell victim to both of them during their lower bracket run. In fact, it wasn't until Grand Final day where they began to look somewhat dominant, with a 2-0 win over Man LFO, where the August roster was restricted to just 4 round wins. They even managed to get a jump on Enterprise during the Grand Final, taking their map pick of Bank 7-5. However, when EP accelerated away with a 7-1 win on Chiefs map pick of Labs, that was the straw that ultimately broke the camel's back, as they would lose the series 2-1, despite map 3 going all the way to round 12. I know the new Chiefs roster is a downgrade compared to having players like Jigsaw, Brendo, Wearables, and Oda on the books, and I mean no disrespect to the boys, both former and current, but that's the reality of a region as small as Oceania. Top-end talent is lacking compared to the EML or the NAL. However, the potential of this long game rebuild is absolutely there. We were willing to see what the Chiefs were cooking with this one, and so far they have delivered on their promise. If they can keep this up and continue building on the good form from kickoff, I can certainly see them becoming a force to be reckoned with by the pointy end of the stage, maybe going into stage 2 as well. Watch this space, people, and I don't say that lightly. And finally, we come to Enterprise, our reigning Oceania kickoff champions, which is crazy to think when they themselves had to rebuild their roster from scratch. After their SI campaign came to an end in the group stage, the previous roster kind of imploded. From what I hear, and this is speculation, so take with a pinch of salt, the boys knew this was going to be their final event as a team, and that impacted how they played within the server. Sure enough, following a 4-0 group stage, Official Guy retired from competitive Siege, and player, Relays, and coach Mingoran were no longer on the team, leaving just Tuhart and Bappin as the survivors. But what they built in their place might just be the scariest thing to come out of Australia since Dry Courtney's acting ability. Jigsaw, Brendo, and Cairo were all signed on to join Enterprise for 2026, which is scary enough when you combine those three with Tuhart and Bappin's fragging prowess. But to bring an old legend out of the cryo chamber and put him in the coach's seat? That was either a recipe for a monumental cock-up or the start of something truly spectacular. And as luck would have it, former Fnatic player Mag gave us the latter. Enterprise had a rather imperious kickoff campaign, going undefeated in the upper bracket and fending off some spirited challenges along the way. The only map they dropped on their way to the grand final was against Team Anios in the semi-finals. But there was also a 7-0 against the Barbie Boys roster in their very first map, which just proved how deadly this roster really is. And even though their rivals in the Chiefs were able to take their map pick during the grand final, Enterprise were able to bite back and take this series and the kickoff crown, booking their spot in Phase 1 of the Salt Lake City Major, which is where the real magic began. A lot of people thought Enterprise would do relatively well in SLC, certainly making out of Phase 1 and into Phase 2 of the Major. That said, I don't think many people had them qualifying for the Swiss phase in the upper bracket where they win over lows. And I think even fewer people had what they did next in their major bingo cards. EP getting in the Swiss phase on day 1 gave them that extra day to prepare for what lay ahead, and it paid off in spades. NIP were an easy victory to kick things off for them, even if G2 did blunt their momentum in the very next round. But then to completely screw with Team Falcons and get the chocolates over the supposed emo super team, to quote Max Verstappen, simply lovely. EP did squander their first chance at a playoffs berth against Shopify Rebellion, but they had one more opportunity for a main stage berth against Weibo Gaming. It was a bittersweet moment as EP shattered Weibo's hopes and made history by being the first ANZ team to compete on the main stage of LAN in over 6 years, and the first to do so under Blast. They wouldn't make it further than Twisted Minds in the quarterfinals, who themselves were playing out of their minds during EWC, but it didn't really matter in the end. Enterprise went above and beyond during the major, and now find themselves as the benchmark for the APL to try and catch up to. But they do have one potential weakness for teams to exploit. They were one of the better defensive teams at the major with a win rate percentage somewhere in the mid to high 60s, while their attacking win rate is a little bit closer to 55%. That is something Mag and the boys need to have tightened up for future events. But in any case, it should go without saying that Enterprise comfortably retained their OCE championship status by the end of Stage 1. Right now, Oceania is in the best position it has been since its inception back in 2023. With Enterprise leading the charge, the region might actually be the most competitively viable subdivision within the APL, at least on paper. And with Enterprise's top 8 finish in the ESLC Major, we now have an opportunity to send not only another team to an international LAN event to gain some much needed experience, but also cement our status as the top subdivision within the APL going into Stage 2. And it would behoove anyone outside the region to pay attention to what might be the biggest threats coming out of the APL. And with that, we come to the end of our Stage 1 preview for the Oceanic subdivision within the APL. What do you guys think of the teams for Stage 1? Let me know in the comments below, as well as who you think will take the top spot for this stage. If you like this video and you want to see more of it, feel free to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, if you want to check out my Discord channel, there's a link down below if anyone is curious. I do still have my Patreon active for anyone who wishes to check that out. Subscribe there if you're feeling generous. Otherwise, your continued viewership is perfectly fine with me. Next up in this APL preview series is Asia, and they now no longer find themselves the top dogs of the APL. How do you think they're going to respond? Let's find out. But until next time, operators, this is Resident Silverwolf, signing off.